In this demonstration, we're going to go over how you can use layers in Photoshop, and specifically, we're going to cover what's in the Classroom in a Book, the 2017 version, and that's Lesson 4. All right, so this is my Lesson 4 folder right here, and if I open that Lesson 4 folder up, I'm going to start out with some files here. And if we look at the one that says end.pst, and I'm just going to take a quick peek at it, this file is going to eventually ultimately look like this. Okay, so that's the idea of where we're going to end up. And then if you wanted to take a peek at some of the resource files, that's a pineapple, right? There's a picture of the beach. There's a family photo for something. There's the flower that you would see in the, like, sort of upper corner. Okay, so there's some different things that ultimately are going to get us to this place. The family photos not in here, it's something different, but you get the idea. We've got that flower here, the beach. There's a little other thing that is part of the file, you'll see. So let's go ahead and open up where it says start.psd. Let's open that file up. So I'm going to go ahead and you can just double click it, or you can open it in Photoshop. So this is what we've got to start with, and if you wanted down here to just see what the dimensions were, you could make sure that you're choosing, if I click on this little arrow, you can make sure that you've got document dimensions selected, and you'll see that this is currently a 5" by 7 and a little bit inch thing at 150 ppi for the resolution. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with. And you'll notice in this file, if you look in the layers panel, and again, this is the layers icon, this little stacked diamond elevation looking picture, and then if you don't see that, or you can't find it or something, you can always go up here into the window menu, and then you can go to layers, turn it on. So it looks like what we've got here in this set of layers, we have our background layer, which is white, and you'll notice a couple of things. One is that if I turn this little eyeball on or off, I toggle it back and forth, it shows the visibility of the layer. So if you want to see something or not see it, you can either turn the eyeball on or off. And to that effect also, if you are looking for something and you cannot figure out where it is, or why it's not showing up, maybe you just have the visibility of it, for instance, turned off. So you can turn it back on if you need it. The other thing too is the background layer has a little lock over here. If I want to be able to modify this layer, I can just click on that lock to turn it off, and you'll notice that it changes it from background layer now to layer 0. Okay, so this is where I might go and just type, like white background. And it's up to you if you want to change that. You can leave it the way it is, or you can, unlock it and then, type a name here to give it a name so that it's easy for organization. One of the challenges, sometimes, depending on what you're doing, is if you deselect the lock and you turn it off, is that you can then modify it or throw it away. And for this, it's not important because it's just a white background. If I were to throw this background away right now, I could so easily reproduce it in a heartbeat. So honestly, it doesn't matter. So I'd rather just name it white background so that I know what it is. And then we also have the pineapple, which you can see. Okay, if I turn off or on, there's that flower. Here's the word Hawaii. It's just typography. Okay, and then we've got like a little postage. It's got sort of a mask around it, but it's some like clip art kind of thing, right? So it's a little raster image of a postage mark. So this is what we're going to start with, okay? And as I said before, if you want to rename a background, you can just double click right on the name. And you can just type it. Something that might happen is if you were to double click the thumbnail by accident and not the name, you're going to get this layer style thing that pops up. So if you get this, just hit cancel for right now, and make sure that when you're clicking, you're actually double clicking on where the name is in the layer. And we'll go over right clicking and all of that stuff in a little bit. One thing that you'll notice that is not here is that picture of the beach. So one of the things that I can do is if I go back to my lesson 4 folder, you'll see that we've got this beach picture that looks like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this. I'll just double click it. And if it gives you a color match problem, just say, okay, it's all right for now. And you'll notice that we have two tabs here. If I click this, it's the start.psd, and then this is the beach.psd. Before I really go any further on start.psd, I'm going to click on that tab. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. So let's go up here to File. We'll do Save As. And I'm going to call this 04, and then I'll call it Working. All right, so that way any changes that I make won't be saved into that start.psd if I ever needed to go back to it. So now we're working in a thing called working.psd, and then we've got our beach picture right here. Now, one of the things that is kind of nice that you can do if you've got multiple tabs open is you could go over here to the window menu item, and then you'll choose arrange, and then you can look at these different options for the way that you can tile all the open documents on the screen. So if you choose two up vertical, then what it does is it puts them side by side, which is kind of nice. Now, one of the things you'll also notice, I want to show you something here, is that I'm going to just pop this over for a second. If you look on my working.psd file, you'll notice down below where it says 5 by 7 and it's 150 ppi, that is at 150 ppi resolution. But if I look over here at this beach picture, it is at 72 ppi. So that's kind of an important thing to notice. One of the things you're going to find out is that whenever we take this picture of the beach and we put it inside of the pineapple, what's going to happen is it's going to assume the resolution of the pineapple picture. So anytime you take a picture and you move it, or you copy it and then you paste it into a target file, for instance, in this case, working.psd, what's going to happen is the picture that you're pasting is going to change its resolution to match that of its target file. Now, it's not going to destroy the image. We've talked about resolution before, and you might be thinking, well, wait a second, if it goes from 72 to 150, it's going to artificially expand the picture, right? Well, no, the answer is no. And the reason is because you'll notice that when it does that, when it goes up to 150, it basically will have the inverse relationship, so that instead of it being almost 7 inches by 10.5 inches at 72 ppi, it'll be roughly half of that. So it'd be somewhere in the ballpark of, 3.5 inches by about 5.25 inches at 150 ppi, just to give you an idea. So you'll notice the way that these are going to look a little bit different when we move them over. So if I select the beach picture, let's take a look real quick where it says layers. So right now I have the beach tab selected, the beach.pst tab selected, and then if I look at the layer for that, it says layer 1. If we wanted to give it a more descriptive name, we could double click that and let's just call it beach. Beach snapshot or beach or something like that. Just call it beach. And then what I can do is I'll take my move tool. Let's just move that over. I'll take my move tool and I'm going to just slide this thing over. All right, we're just going to move it over and we're going to drop it into this file right here. And you notice that when I did that, if I go and it dropped it behind the pineapple, if I look at my layers, well, the reason it dropped it behind the pineapple is because I did have this background where it says white background. I had that selected. If I hit undo, let's just undo that for a moment. You'll notice that white background was selected. Anytime you have a layer selected and then you add a new file or you paste something in, it's going to basically create a new layer on top of the selected layer. So let's try that again. I'll take this file and I'll move it over. Oops, let's try that again. I'll drop it over here, and then you notice that, boom, it popped it right up on top of the formerly selected layer of white background. It put it on top of that. All right, and it also took the name of the layer that I had named it over in this beach file. So I'm just going to close this beach.psd file. I don't really need it anymore. Although, real quickly, let me show you something. If I go back over here to working.psd, you'll notice that the pineapple right now is behind, or excuse me, is in front of the other picture. If I turn the pineapple's visibility off, right, you'll see that when I moved it over, it is there. Okay, so that is something I think that's helpful to understand. All right. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go over here. I'm going to close this beach.psd file. It's going to ask me, do I want to save it? And that's because the change that I made was I labeled the layer name as beach instead of just layer 1. So I could click save or not, it doesn't really matter. I saved it, it's closed, and now this is what we're dealing with. Okay, so if I toggle that pineapple off, there's that picture again, right? And so I can go ahead and save this file, this working.psd file at this point. I can save this. So now what we have is we're working with a complete file. All right. All right. Now, one of the things that if you were to look at the final picture that we have around this snapshot is we have a white border. Well, it's a little bit hard to see what's going on right now because we have this white background. So if you were to look at the picture of the beach, let's just sort of move it so it's a little bit more centered. What we can do is we can add our white background, or excuse me, our white border to this picture, and now we'll be able to see it. And you'll notice that there's like a checker pattern. You might be wondering what that is. That checker pattern just means that there's transparency behind it. That's all that means. So if you see a checkerboard, it means that there is just complete transparency. Yeah, all right. So what I can do here are two things to add a border around this. Actually, there are more than two things, but I'm going to mainly show you just a couple of things. One is that I could go up to layer and then jump down here to layer style, and you have all these different layer styles that you can select. Now there are so many different things that you can choose from. One of them is stroke, but an easier way, honestly, than going all the way up to layer style and then finding the thing that you want would be actually using the layer panel itself. So while this layer is selected, you would want to then come down and you can add an effect, right? So it's this is going to be a layer style where it says FX. It's also referred to as a layer effect. So layer style, layer effect. So if I come down, I can choose stroke like this, and it pops this same dialog box up that I was showing you before. So let me show you a couple of things. If I hit cancel, right, there's three different ways to add this layer effect. One is to go up to layer, as I said before, layer style, and then choose it from this list. Another would be to, while the layer is selected, come down here to the FX button and choose it. And another way would be, as I showed you before, if you double click on the thumbnail of the pixels right here, it'll automatically pop this up. So there are three different ways you can easily access that. Now, if I want to add that from this point, then I would have to actually come in and select where it says stroke, and I need to click this to actually get the stroke options to come up. And you'll see that I have some different choices here. Right, and this is where I would want to adjust the size of the layer, right, or excuse me, the size of the stroke. And I could, tell it how big or how small I wanted it to be. This is where you tell it, if you want it position inside, center, outside. We're going to choose inside, so it keeps it same dimensions. The blend mode, you could choose to be something different, and we'll talk about blend modes in a little bit, but basically what a blend mode is where it interacts with the color of the pixels below it. So we're not doing that right now. The opacity, so you could actually lower the opacity, you see. Now, the other thing I want to do is change the color of this so it's like a regular snapshot print. I'm going to actually choose this white color up here so that it ends up having a white border. All right. So if you don't like the border that thick, you could always change it. Do something like 5 pixels. It's a little bit smaller. It's really up to you. I kind of like a bigger one. I think your book does find 5 pixels. I think I might prefer something more like 10. Let's try that. And click OK. All right. And so now we've got this thing that's got, a stroke around it. The other thing that I could have done too is if I wanted, and we can always go back later and do this, but to give you some sense, like if you wanted to add a drop shadow, you could also double click it, or you could add it with the FX button. And then you could also add a drop shadow here as well. And you can kind of play around with these with these settings too, and you see the drop shadow over here. One of the things that I'll tell you about using drop shadows is that you want to try to put whatever is really going to be underneath it, because trying to figure out a drop shadow on this transparency checkerboard is kind of difficult. So I'm actually going to hit cancel on that. And if you wanted a drop shadow later, you could go back and you could add that whenever you get a better sense of what's actually behind it. The last thing I want to show you before we move on to the next portion of this is that I'll go ahead and turn all the other pictures on, or all the other, not pictures, but layers on. And let's get the order of this a little bit better. So if you were to take a peek at the one that says end right here, you can see that, well, first of all, the picture's smaller and it's sort of at an angle. We'll worry about that later. But right now you can see that it's like behind the flower, but it's in front of the pineapple. It's behind the postage stamp. It's probably behind the text as well. So what I'll do is go ahead and let's reorder where it lives. And it's really simple in Photoshop. If I want this beach picture to be on top of the pineapple, I literally click it, I hold it and I drag it, and then I can drop it in between different layers. And then now it's kind of like in the right spot, basically. I mean, we're going to monkey with it some more in a little while, but right now it's actually in the right position to move forward with the demonstration. So why don't you go ahead and this is going to be the end of this video, and then you can move forward and then we'll keep going with this demo.